Hello and welcome to an episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason, and this is a Historic National Road episode, and I am in Knightstown, Indiana. And this town was actually named after the guy who surveyed the National Road, platting it out before the Indiana National Road was paved. And this was actually the first town that was platted on the National Road, and of course it made perfect sense to name it after that gentleman. And he's going to be talked about in this historical marker. And there's a couple buildings I'd like to show you after I do this marker, so come with me. Alright, so here is the town square. A lot of antique shops, a few restaurants, mom and pop ones that is, no fast food that I saw, but a couple gas stations. But here is that interpretive panel. This one's a little lengthy, but I'll try to minimize it a little bit. But constructing the National Road through Indiana in the early 19th century was a monumental task. The road, which crossed the rich soil of Indiana, connected people, wealth, and commerce, and linked the state to the rest of the nation. Increased westward migration and the dramatic enlargement of the United States after the purchase of the Louisiana Territory in 1803 compelled the national government to establish a reliable route west. In 1806, after many years of heated debate, the National Road, also known as the Cumberland Road and National Pike, was approved by the U.S. Congress. Alright, so down here it talks about Jonathan Knight, the namesake for this town. Getting Congress to approve the road proved a minuscule accomplishment compared to the immense undertaking of building the road. From the beginning, surveyors and engineers were confronted by the rocky terrain and the steep slopes of the Appalachian Mountains. It would take 20 years of arduous, back-breaking labor to survey and construct the route. As the route finally pushed into western Ohio, Jonathan Knight was dispatched from Washington, D.C. to survey the Indiana segment of the road. Surveying the road in Indiana began in 1827. From a stake marking the Ohio-Indiana state line, Knight noted that he commenced for the continuation of the Cumberland Road 1 chain and 5 links from the Notched Beech and 1 chain and 9 links from the Notched Poplar. From his Indianapolis headquarters, Knight surveyed both east and west. The route would run 150 miles through Indiana, 72 miles east of Indianapolis, and 78 miles west. And then down here it just talks about building the road, but it's weird because, we all take for granted our roads, and a lot of times we do witness roads and streets being paved, for housing and all that, and businesses. But building the road, when construction began, 90% of the route was densely forested and would need to be cleared before the road would be graded. See, that's something, nobody ever talks about, not even in our history lessons. Yes, definitely a lot of sacrifices need to be made, including, yes, natural features. But to clear a corridor roughly the width of a modern interstate highway, scores of workers were needed. Axemen felled trees. Men removed roots by hand. Oxen and horses tore out stumps. Laborers wielding pick and shovel leveled the earth. Teams of horses and oxen dragged the clearing with thick wooden boards to establish a rough road. For much of Indiana, this rough road was as good as it got, except for a few miles of improved crushed stone or plank or corduroy surfacing, like the timbers or logs laid side by side. The National Road was a largely rutted, muddy, and unpredictable route. And if you've watched my National Road episodes in Indiana in the past, yes, they all had the same back, but it mostly talks about how important the National Road was and how it became America's first federally funded road, and how the automobile revived the National Road in the 1920s. Well, it wasn't always that way, because railroads made the National Road kind of irrelevant for a time. But as cars and trucks took to the road, the federal government established a nationwide network of paved all-weather highways. The old National Road was one of the first routes designated under the new federal highway numbering system in 1926. U.S. Route 40, a transcontinental highway from Atlantic City, New Jersey to San Francisco, California. Once again, the road gave rise to new opportunities. Like the blacksmith shops and taverns of the past, gas stations, diners, and motels ushered in a new era of prosperity. Until the 1970s, with the completion of Interstate 70, US 40 was one of the country's primary east-west routes. And then down here it says, in 2002, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation designated the historic National Road from Maryland to Illinois an All-American Road. Indiana is actively working to preserve its segment of the road, structures, and landscapes along this historic corridor. So here's the map. Started in Terre Haute. I kind of went backwards. Most people would rather travel the National Road westward because that's how it was intended to be. But I went through Terre Haute, Brazil, Rising Hall, Plainfield, Indianapolis, Greenfield, Knightstown, and my next stop is going to be Louisville, and I hope to end up in Richmond tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and take you up that street, see what's there. So in that big building right there is the Knightstown Academy. See all the telescope and the globe on top. Isn't that cool? Hopefully you can see it, but there's a basketball court here too. That was constructed in 1876, and then 100 years later it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. And I'll go ahead and show you a cool movie relic behind it. And behind the Knightstown Academy is the famous Hoosier gym. This is best known as the iconic gym used in the movie Hoosiers that starred Gene Hackman. And it was constructed in 1921. Reportedly, apparently it's open for tours, but today there's a sign, big sign that says it's closed, meaning the gym. But the gym today is virtually unchanged from when it was featured in the famous movie as the home court for the Hickory Huskers. A wonderfully preserved historic gem that encapsulates and celebrates Indiana's love for basketball. And this was actually built as an addition to the Knightstown Academy. And if you want to put your name on here, like if you're a big fan of the movie, you can definitely buy some memorial bricks and put your name on it and show your grandkids when you get older. Oh look, they even made plants out of basketballs, or plant holders. So I thought I'd just kind of walk around the outside. It's like, well, if I can't go inside, might as well check the exterior, right? Alright, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason in Knightstown, Indiana, signing off.